Elaine looked straight at me, her voice low but sharp enough to cut the air in the dining room. Don't get used to living off someone else. She said it like she was laying out a family rule everyone had to follow. I sat there with my hand resting lightly on my knee, not reacting. I just looked into her eyes for a few seconds, calm enough that she leaned back a little. I thought that moment was the lowest point, but then, when I stood up to get more water, she opened my purse. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. She pulled the zipper slowly, checked each pocket like she was inspecting an item in a store. She thought I didn't see her, but I did, and I closed the fridge door a little louder than normal to let her know I was back. She flinched, pulled the purse toward her, and set it back in place. No apology, no explanation. And she just lowered her head as if nothing had happened. To see the root of it all, I have to go back to the beginning. My name is Brooke. I teach art at a middle school near downtown. I'm not rich, not poor. I work enough to live and still have a little time to breathe. I like calm, and I like watching a student finish a painting they never thought they could pull off. I don't show off. I'm not the kind of person who makes anyone say wow the first time they meet me. But I know I live honestly, and I know I have value. Sam came into my life as gently as he is. He works as a railway maintenance engineer, a job most people overlook, but one that keeps the whole city running. He's kind, practical, and a little oblivious to the sharpness in his mother's eyes. With me, Sam felt safe. That is, until I met his family. Elaine, his mother, he is the kind of woman who straightens a tablecloth even when it's already smooth. She watches everything with calculating eyes. I know this type of person. They don't judge others by feeling, but by numbers. I saw it the first time I met her, when her gaze rested on my purse a beat longer than it needed to. Paige, Sam's younger sister, was a different story. She worked in real estate and carried herself like someone used to standing above everyone else. She was beautiful, sharp, and talked as if she were assessing the investment potential of the person in front of her. When Sam introduced me, Paige's smile wasn't exactly happiness. It looked more like she was trying to figure out what I was lacking. The first meeting wasn't terrible, but there were details anyone paying attention would file away without much effort. Here Paige asked for my annual income, not in a caring way, more like she was reviewing a job application. Her voice was light, but there wasn't a question mark anywhere in it, just scrutiny. Elaine smiled and said I was simple in a cute way. The word simple carried all the meaning I needed. It was the polite way of saying I wasn't impressive enough for the standard they had set for their son. I didn't respond. I just looked at Sam. He didn't notice that under his mom's and sister's cheerful small talk was a whole list of comparisons I never signed up for. He just held my hand under the table and smiled. He thought everything was fine. But I already knew my place had been set from the first minute. A week later, we had dinner with his family again, and that time, they didn't hold back the way they did on the first meeting. Elaine asked if I wanted to take extra courses to increase my income for the future. Her voice was gentle, but what she meant was anything but. The message was clear. My income wasn't enough. Paige nodded along as if agreeing with the professional assessment. I said I was happy with my current job. I teach kids, and I like that. Elaine paused, then said, "A hobby is a hobby, but a family needs stability." Sam laughed and said she was overthinking it. But in that laugh, I heard something else. He didn't notice the gap they were building around us. I started paying attention to every small detail, not to react, but to understand exactly what I was stepping into. Another time, when I came over for dinner, and Paige set out a spread of expensive dishes and joked that I only needed to contribute with good vibes, since teachers probably don't have much left over. She said it like a joke. Her eyes said otherwise. Elaine kept her politeness so tight, it felt cold. She looked at me like she was calculating how much of a burden I'd be on Sam. Every sentence, every look, every half compliment aimed at one thing: I wasn't enough. Sam didn't mean to take their side, but he didn't see what I saw. When I told him something Elaine said, he just replied, "She's just worried." He didn't realize that her worry came in the shape of condescension. And then I understood the most important thing. They didn't consider what they said to be insulting. They thought it was an obvious truth. They thought Sam was above me, and I wasn't. Yet that wasn't a temporary misunderstanding. It was a fixed view, a neat little tier system that put me exactly where they wanted me. Lower. I knew it. And I never forgot how that felt. Once I understood how they saw me, everything became clearer. Not because they changed, but because I stopped convincing myself it was all harmless. And once I woke up to it, I started noticing every little hidden cut they slipped into what looked like ordinary family dinners. Elaine liked to control our plans. She didn't ask. She announced, "This Sunday you're coming over. Someone wants to meet you." She said it to Sam, but her eyes were always on me. If I already had plans, she would pause for a long beat, then let out a soft breath like I'd just done something careless. Sam always tried to smooth things over. He'd say, "Just try a little. Mom just wants the family to stay close." He didn't see that this idea of staying close never included me. It was just Elaine arranging things the way she wanted. Paige was more subtle. She loved showing off expensive gifts she bought for the family whenever she got the smallest chance. A new watch for their dad, crystal glasses for their mom, imported decor for the living room. And always, right after saying the price, she'd turn to me with a thin smile. "Brooke can just bring the good vibes," as if I came from a place where people didn't know the value of anything. I didn't respond, but I didn't look away anymore. And maybe that was why Paige tried even harder to dig in. One afternoon, I overheard Elaine talking on the phone in the living room. I didn't mean to listen, but I was too close not to hear. "Sam needs to look closely at her finances before he goes any further," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just firm, like she was talking about adjusting the family budget. Sam walked in right after she finished. He didn't know I'd heard anything, and I didn't bring it up. I just kept that sentence inside me, like a tiny shard of glass sharp enough to make sure I wouldn't stay naive anymore. Their way of devaluing me didn't stop at private dinners. It showed up in front of other people, too. At a relative's birthday party, while I was talking with a few older guests, someone asked what subject I taught. I answered naturally. My work isn't something I ever feel the need to hide. But before I could say more, Elaine spoke right behind me. "She teaches art. It's a cute job. Just a little unstable." Her last words dropped in volume. Like she was sharing a side note, but they were loud enough to shift how people looked at me. One guest asked bluntly, "Can you make enough to live on teaching art?" There was no malice in the tone, just honest curiosity. But the looks on Elaine's and Paige's faces turned that question into something else. I just smiled and said I got by. I didn't need to pretend to be glamorous. Paige stepped over and set her hand lightly on my shoulder like she was being friendly. Brooke could think about switching to something more stable, just so Sam doesn't have to worry so much. The sentence dropped onto the cold tile floor like a weight. No one objected. No one defended me. Everyone just nodded as if Paige had given a moral life lesson. I looked straight into her eyes. "I'm fine." I said it short. No explanation, no softness. And that answer made Paige's smile freeze for half a second. Elaine stepped in with a sentence loaded with meaning. A woman should know her place in a family, especially when she's entering a family that already has standards. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. I knew exactly who she meant. Being clear-headed made everything sharper. I wasn't angry. Anger would only make them think I was weak. I stood there, listening to every word, and it didn't hurt the way it used to. There was only a cold line running through me. A kind of cold that helped me see the real gap between us wasn't money. It was respect. I didn't talk much, but sometimes I let a quiet, pointed line slip out just enough to make them look at me differently. Once, when Elaine mentioned family standards, I replied, standards show in how people treat others, but not in how much they earn. I said it calmly, no raised voice, but Elaine went silent for a few seconds. Sam heard these exchanges, but he never really understood them. He always tried to smooth things over by placing his hand on my back, like that was enough to fix everything. He didn't know what I needed, wasn't that light touch. It was for him to see how his family was treating me. One afternoon, when Sam left his phone on the kitchen counter to take a shower, the screen lit up with a new message. I'm not someone who goes through his things, but the sender's name was right in front of me. Elaine. The message had only one sentence, short, and enough to send a chill through me. Don't let your feelings push you into a stupid decision. The stupid decision she meant was me. There was nothing to guess. I didn't open the message. I just looked at the screen until it went dark. I didn't blame Sam. I didn't get angry at Elaine. I just went quiet for a few seconds, the way you do when you're standing at the beach and realize the waves are bigger than you thought. I knew a line was about to be crossed, and this time it wouldn't stop at vague little comments. They'd push further because they believed I'd endure it. They thought I clung to Sam, so I'd stay silent. But my silence wasn't acceptance. It was the step back before I stood up. And I understood that most clearly when I closed the phone and went back to washing dishes as if nothing had happened. I knew this. If they thought I was the one clinging, they'd keep pushing until I was the one to end it. The engagement party took place in a house so big that the sound of people talking echoed softly, like background noise at an upscale event. Sam's relatives were almost all there. People raised their glasses, smiled just enough to be polite, and looked at us as if they were witnessing a successful deal for his family. I could feel the familiar, assessing looks from a few older guests, the same kind I'd seen over and over again. I excused myself and stepped into the backyard for a minute to breathe. I wasn't tense. I just needed a quiet moment to reset my rhythm. When I walked back in, I stopped in the hallway leading to the living room. Elaine's voice came through clearly, every word crisp, not lowered, not hidden. She thought I was far enough away not to hear. Sam is carrying everything. The girl has no financial future. I stood still. My heartbeat didn't rise. I just listened. If they get married, he has to protect the family assets, she went on. I've prepared an agreement. She needs to sign it. If not, it's better to rethink the whole thing. A relative let out a small "oh." Not out of shock, but because the topic was blunt for polite company. Elaine didn't stop. Sam is too soft. You have to push him. Otherwise, he'll end up supporting an extra person. I placed my hand on the doorframe to steady myself, not because I was shocked, but because the clarity in her voice showed this wasn't another small cut. This was the first swing she was sure I'd never fight back against. I stepped into the living room, not fast, not loud, just enough for everyone to see me. The conversation stopped as if someone had shut off the music. Elaine turned around. Her face lost half its color. I looked straight at her, not smiling, not offering politeness to something that didn't deserve it. I stood in the center of the room, under the lights bright enough for everyone to see every bit of my expression. No one spoke. No one greeted me. The air tightened so much I could almost hear the faint clink of glasses from the kitchen behind us. I said one sentence, calm, clear, no raised voice. The only person talking about money here is you, and you're also the one who asked a lawyer to draft papers behind my back. My words hit the room like a piece of glass shattering sharp, silent, and impossible to put back together. Elaine froze. She tried to speak, but her throat caught. The relatives looked at her with a mix of surprise and discomfort. No one stepped forward to defend her. No one said I misunderstood. Yeah, because they all heard her say those things just minutes earlier. Paige stood in the corner. She looked at me longer than she ever had before, her eyes no longer sizing me up to see what kind of person I was. This time, she was afraid. Not afraid I'd make a scene I didn't need to. She was afraid of the cold steadiness in the way I stood there, not lowering myself, not apologizing, not explaining. She realized I wasn't someone they could mold. Sam stepped toward me, his face so unsure his eyes didn't know who to look at first. Brooke? I didn't know Mom. I cut him off with just a look, not to blame him, but to let him know the time for him to smooth things over was gone. I didn't look at Elaine again. I looked at the people around the room, the ones who had been laughing moments before, acting like this wedding was a sealed deal. Now they were quiet in front of one simple truth. The person being treated like a freeloader wasn't me. I didn't say anything else. Exposure doesn't need to be long, it just needs to be true. Elaine blinked fast, her face shifting from pale to tight. She tried to force out an explanation, but the last part of her voice shook. I just want Sam to be safe. I answered with the same steady tone. Safety isn't something you get by tearing someone else down. A few relatives lowered their heads, pretending to fix their napkins. They didn't want to get involved, but they didn't look at Elaine the same way anymore. Paige avoided my eyes. For the first time, her arrogance was gone. Not because I threatened her, but because she knew I had seen through every layer of the mask her family hid behind. Sam stood between us, like someone who had just walked into a fight he wasn't prepared for. Mom, why would you do that? He said quietly, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. Elaine turned away, but her silence answered for her. There was no screaming, no chaos, no messy scene for anyone hoping for cheap drama. Just the truth placed on the table clear and clean enough that no one could brush it aside. I looked around the room one last time, not to find an ally, just to confirm that everything that needed to be exposed had already been exposed. Nothing more to say. I turned and walked out of the living room with steady, cold steps. No one stopped me. No one dared. Enough. They had broken at the exact point they needed to. And when I closed the door behind me, I knew my revenge arc had just begun. Not with loud payback, but by taking back the right to stand in my own place. After that party, no one mentioned what happened in the living room. But the silence wasn't forgetting. It was the kind of silence people keep when they know they've shown their true colors and are scrambling to fix the image they ruined. Sam's family still invited me to a few dinners afterward, more polite, quieter, and absolutely no one talked about money again. But the way they looked at me had changed. Not annoyed, not friendly, more like they were watching from a distance to see if I'd explode. Elaine changed the most. She tried to act conciliatory, spoke softer, even asked if teaching kids was fun. But the control in her voice was still there, just wrapped in a polite coating. She no longer talked about financial futures, but every time Sam and I stood up to leave, she looked at me like I was a variable she still couldn't calculate. I didn't respond to that fake shift. I stayed calm and watched, because sometimes, when things get unusually smooth, it's a sign something bigger is waiting behind it. I found out one night when Sam left a folder on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower. I came out to grab a bottle of water and saw a few pages sticking out from the edge of the cover. I'm not a nosy person. But at the top corner of a page were the words prenuptial agreement draft. I stood still for a few seconds. I didn't touch it, didn't open it. I just looked at the word draft. A draft meant it wasn't something Elaine came up with a few days ago. It had existed long before that. When Sam walked out and saw me looking at the papers, his face changed fast. He couldn't hide it. She and I didn't need to ask. He told me himself. I knew Mom had it made a while ago, but I wasn't going to give it to you. I just didn't want problems. His words weren't a heavy blow. They were just enough of a tap to open a door in my mind. The problem had never been only Elaine or Paige. It was Sam. It was the fact that he let them define me while he stayed silent. He never meant to hurt me, but his silence was what made everything feel acceptable to them. I pulled out a chair and sat down, not to make a scene, just to steady myself before saying what I needed to say. Sam, you know what they think of me, and you let it happen. My voice was even, not accusing, just stating a fact. He sighed and sat next to me. I just didn't want things to get worse if I pushed back. I looked at him. For the first time, I saw the distance we had never named. He wanted peace, even if that peace sat on my shoulders. That moment made everything clear. I stood up, slipped the engagement ring off my finger, and set it on the table. It was a small movement, but the sound of the ring hitting the wood carried farther than I expected. I'm not stepping into a marriage where I'm treated like a debt, I said. Calm, not angry, not crying. Those feelings had fallen away long ago. Sam shot to his feet. Brooke, wait, that's just my mom. You know that. You know I love you. Love isn't enough, I said. Not when you let someone else decide who I am. He lifted his hand like he wanted to stop me, but it froze midair. I'll talk to my mom. I shook my head. You only say that because I saw the papers. And not because your mom pulled them out behind my back. He couldn't argue, because it was true. In the bright kitchen, I saw everything I needed to make my final decision. Sam wasn't a bad man, but he wasn't strong enough. Not strong enough to stand in front of his family and protect what he claimed he valued. I picked up my bag, not rushing, not shaking. I didn't look around for one last memory to hold on to. Things that don't belong to you aren't worth carrying. Sam followed me to the door. Brooke, please, don't leave like this. I turned to him without avoiding his eyes. I'm not leaving because I'm angry at them. I'm leaving because I don't see you standing with me. That sentence pushed him back half a step, not because it hurt, but because he finally saw what he'd been avoiding. I opened the door. No one stopped me. No one called out. No sound of anything falling. No crying. Just the soft click of the door closing behind me, clean and final like a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the air was cold but not biting. I stepped down the front steps, feeling like I'd just taken off a tight brace around my chest. Not pain, just lightness. Light enough that I knew I'd made the right choice. My leaving created a silence Sam's family wasn't prepared for. They were used to controlling things, not to being left alone with the mess they made. Elaine was furious for a few days. I knew because Sam sent me a short text. Mom doesn't understand why you reacted so strongly. But she couldn't publicly blame me. Everyone at the engagement party had heard her voice, heard every word, and they knew exactly who crossed the line first. Elaine's anger had nowhere to land, and that left her quiet in a different way, the quiet of someone who has lost footing. Paige changed too. No more sweet, mocking comments, no more smiles that treated me like a burden. Instead, she avoided me. Not out of dislike, but because she knew that standing in front of me now, she had no words left to put herself above me. I didn't see her at all afterward, but I heard through someone we both knew that Paige said, Brooke isn't the kind of person our mom thought she was. I didn't care much. That realization came too late to matter. Sam's family stopped calling me a freeloader. Not because they'd changed their minds, because they didn't dare say those words after the truth had been laid out in the middle of the living room in front of all their relatives. What they were avoiding now wasn't me. It was the mirror they'd been forced to see themselves in. I spent the next month focusing on work. I taught more, spent more time with my students, and the lightness in my chest made everything around me feel easier. I signed up for an extended teaching certificate I'd been putting off. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted to start a small community art class, somewhere neighborhood kids could come and learn without worrying about grades. I changed a few things in my apartment. A new easel, a few more paint boxes, an old wooden table I bought from a small shop near school. The apartment wasn't big, but for the first time in months, it felt entirely mine. No one asking about my financial trajectory or future stability. No eyes measuring my worth with things that weren't me. I was steady, and I didn't need anyone to prop me up. And that feeling wasn't pride, it was peace. I saw Sam a month later, while picking up paint and paper for the new class. He stood at the end of the aisle, holding a repair kit. He saw me first. The way he looked at me felt like he was trying to find something he already knew he'd lost. Brooke? He said my name softly, almost like he was afraid to break something fragile. I nodded, not avoiding him, not colder than necessary. He apologized. This time he didn't rush to explain, didn't blame his mother. It was a real apology, heavier than anything he'd said before. My mom realizes there were misunderstandings, he added, his voice fading as he watched my reaction. I set the paint box down in the cart and looked straight at him. I didn't leave because of them, I said, steady. I left because you let them define me. It wasn't a sharp line meant to cut. It was just the truth. But the silence that followed showed it landed exactly where it needed to. Sam lowered his head, not from shame, but from understanding. And sometimes, understanding too late is its own kind of loss. He asked quietly, "If I change, is there any chance?" I shook my head, not out of bitterness, but because I'd already stepped out of that past. "I'm not going back," I said softly. "Not because I didn't love you, but because I can't love in a place where I have to prove I'm enough." Sam nodded. No attempt to hold on. No blame. I knew that moment wasn't a win for me, but the right ending to something that had been out of rhythm for a long time. I pushed the cart forward, didn't look back, didn't need to see how long he stayed there. My revenge arc didn't come with smashing plates or stormy confrontations. It lived in the calm way I walked away, in the fact that I didn't have to insult anyone to feel taller, in how my silence forced them to face their own behavior. I didn't go back, not to prove I'd won, but because I'd found myself again in a place they couldn't reach. That calm was the ending they couldn't deny. It was what made Elaine go quiet, made Paige change the way she looked at things, made Sam realize what he lost wasn't a woman who lacked money, but a woman he wasn't brave enough to stand beside. I'll end my story here, not in anger, in self-respect. I didn't stay somewhere that diminished me, and I don't need anyone to say I was right. I just need to know I didn't remain in a place that made me smaller. And if someone asks whether I regret it, I'd say no regrets, just relief. Because sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's how you save yourself before you stop recognizing who you are. Would you stay in a family that sees you as a burden? Or would you walk away knowing you deserve more? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'll see you next time.